couple different reasons.
Good evening and welcome to We the Village, produced by Ron Hall, and I'm your host, Sharonda Allen. This is a sequel episode. We have again with us the esteemed scholar, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Welcome back to We the Village, Dr. Jeffries.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure. I enjoyed the last time we had a chance to do a shooting, and just the concept of We the Village.
Yes.
I like that. We need to work with that.
Absolutely. So I know this evening you have bought some wonderful artifacts, some photos and books. I would like to give you an opportunity to share that because I think a lot of times culturally people miss out on the roots of what we should be focused on.
Yes.
To get ourselves back to our African centeredness as we were discussing earlier. So I want to give this opportunity to
50 years. Been originally Thurgood and with this each other, and we had the institutions to put their hands on us. Now, it was an integrated neighborhood, but black folks study in Europe, scene exploded. New Jersey at this top university, University of Lausanne. But the world exploded on me, not just the African American struggle in America,
right.
but the international village impacted on me.
Nice.
And so that was a great opportunity to expand my world. And
Yes.
so clearly I understand and appreciate when they say knowledge is power.
Yes.
And so it clearly is. But that puts the black person, the person of African descent, in trouble, because most of what we know has been produced out of the European American value system or white folks' ideas and concepts and affirmation. So if we're really true to who we should be, we have to master that world, which we are part of.
Yes.
But we have to master our world.
Yes.
And that's where we are in trouble, because there's so much distraction to take us away from mastering our world.
Yes.
And we have to consciously work toward making sure we understand who we are, whose we are, where we come from, and what commitment we have to the future.
Yes.
And so the African experience started interesting enough for me, in the beginning in my home, my
Yes.
mother was very conscious about our African background, so that I was aware of the significance of Africa. But she was also, and my family was also conscious of the struggle in America.
Yes.
So that's why I grew up wanting to be this civil rights fighter for our rights.
Yes.
And I'm proud that that gave me my grounding.
Yes.
But I'm also glad that this international experience gave me my African component.
Yes.
So the African American and the African are complementary in me. And so
Yes.
when I get a chance to express it, I take that opportunity. I have what I call my $1 million white boy education.
Yes.
That's the European. We were still being trained well in the Newark schools. We went on to Barringer High School and then on to Lafayette College.
Right.
And then eventually on to Columbia University. But by the time I got to Columbia, I did a year of law school at NYU.
Right.
But Africa was calling,
Yes.
and the global village was calling.
Yes.
And so we were able to collectively move out of just a European educational focus and into a global focus. So I have my $1 million white boy education that includes the best schools, including Columbia University and the PhD and the master's. But I am what I am because of the multi-billion-dollar education that comes from traveling through the global village
Yes.
and having been formed in our African American village, having been formed to receive this knowledge. It was not something I ran from, it was something I ran to.
So you have a lot of great contemporaries from in your life, in your studies, such as Dr. Ben, John Henry Clark, A Great and Mighty Walk. I used to show that to my students every year. That is a great documentary. Folks like Sheikh Anta Diop, can you, because I see you have 2 of his books here, can you kind of share some of your experiences with some of those greats? Dr. Barbara Wheeler too, you know, that's...
Yes, and this is a perfect example of the village.
Yes.
This is the biography of Dr. Clark,
Yes.
and it was actually written by a beautiful, talented sister who could be your sister.
Oh, really? Okay.
And her name is Dr. Barbara Adams. She has African Ghanaian background and Guyanese South American background. But she was one of Dr. Clark's students. Then she
Nice.
became a professor. So she did a biography of Dr. Clark.
Nice.
Dr. John Henry Clark, the master teacher. Now, he's such an important part of us understanding the village because he was born and raised early on in Union Springs, Alabama. Now, you're talking about way down into the south of these United States.
Right.
Then at an early age, son of a sharecropper, he was. At an early age, the family moved further east to Columbus, Georgia.
Right.
And so his foundation is Alabama and Georgia. But he lets us know as we sat at his feet because he became our great master teacher.
Yes.
And by we, I mean so many hundreds, if not thousands of us have been at the feet of this great brother
Yes.
who comes from out of the miseducation in the South because they certainly were not teaching anything serious in the Southern schools. In fact, the African American population didn't go to full school year. You went maybe
outside
3 or
of the
4
growing
months because
season.
you had to
to
pick
grow.
the cotton and you had to be a part of that
Agriculture.
process.
Yes.
But he says, and explaining to us where his roots are, his village roots, he says, I've had 3 deities in my life. My grandmother, my mother, and my 5th grade school teacher, Eveline Taylor.
Nice.
Now, what he explained to us was that they recognized that there was something special about him and the possibilities of his life. They recognized it before he could as a young boy, and they
course.
nurtured it. And they made sure he got special socialization, because if you're going to grow and develop, I use the pyramid triangle shape to explain things. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis at the top.
Yes.
And so as you grow up, of course, you are the result of your mother, your father, their interrelationship, and then you are the synthesis.
Yes.
But the values that are transmitted to you, using the pyramid again, socialization, that's the key.
Yes.
Socialization is how you become who and what you are.
Yes.
And the family, and when Hillary Clinton borrowed this concept, and she said it takes a village to raise a child. But the deep African understanding of that is it takes a whole village to raise a child.
Right.
And so you're not just talking about your own family structure, but you're talking about the elders of the village and the queen mothers of the village and the people with talents in the village. So the Africans have a value system that I explain it as the 3 C's. That's the value system that we inherited from Africa as we helped to lay the foundations for world civilization and culture. And then when we were taken out of Africa, we didn't leave our values in Africa. When we put together socialization, how you get your foundation, acculturation, how you fit into society, and that connection produces you.
Yes.
And that's your real self-development. Africans brought out of Africa into these hulls of ships. They didn't come empty-handed, empty-hearted, empty-headed. And they were able to take what was their traditional village, which was communal, cooperative, and collective. I call that the 3 C's.
Yes.
A village is where you communal, you live together. And then when there's a work to be done, you work together. So communal cooperative is the foundation of the village concept. And then collective, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, collective would be you share. Now, that's a value system that's centered around spirituality.
Yes.
As opposed to materiality.
Yes.
And that's in the African, wherever he or she may find themselves. But then, taken out of that context, they were in an environment of complete super exploitation by the European value system, which the Europeans developed for themselves and their own people before they had any relationship with the processes that produced the African. European value system coming from the North is the 3 Ds, domination, destruction, and death.
Wow.
Now, people say, well, Dr. J, aren't you trying to be kind of cold-blooded? No, I'm trying to be realistic to explain how you can come out of a value system of the sun in which you related to the movement of the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and you connected your culture, your communal, cooperative, and collective culture to that. So you harmonize with nature.
Yes.
And in fact, you produce what I call sun people's values. And people say, Dr. J, you had to go a little deeper than that. Well, I said, I've been trained to go deep, deep, deep. And on a TV program, you go as far as you can. But for me, sun is not just the sun that's a part of our world and our cosmos, but it's a reference to S-U-N. The sun value system of peoples of color is, and it's very important for us to make the distinction between the value system of the ice, the northern value system, individualism, competitivism, exploitationism.
Survival.
And survival by any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Even if it means, killing folks. And
eliminating your competition.
But the Sun people's value system of people of color, Native Americans, Southern Asians, and Africans is spiritual union with nature.
Right.
And so S for spiritual, U for union, and N for nature.
I love that acronym.
That is what that explains the value systems of the South composed to the value systems of the North. Now, for me to teach that, I had to master that way of presenting it. because Dr. Clark's great partner is a brother called Dr. Sharonda Diop.
Yes.
So this is Dr. Clark's student doing a fantastic biography of him, and I did an introduction to that.
Yes.
And she had worked on my biography, but unfortunately when she went home to the Caribbean and she came back a couple of years ago, she passed
Oh
on.
my goodness.
But the work was done. So
Okay, good,
eventually
okay.
there'll be a comparable biography on Len Jeffries, comparable to this one on Dr. Clark, done by this beautiful sister, Dr. Barbara Adams.
And we need that in our schools.
Yes, and
We do.
and this brother certainly coming from a place where education was denied him,
Yes.
even going into libraries was denied him. But he was working for a white man when he was younger, and he falsified the white man's a card saying he was getting books out of the library for the
Oh,
white
wow.
man.
So he was able to smuggle
So
them
he
out.
was able to smuggle the knowledge out.
Wow.
And then he became so enamored with books and so in love with books that eventually he began to collect books. And so when he passed on in 1999, his widow was able to get 20,000 books that he had accumulated in Harlem and pass those books down to the Woodruff Library in Atlanta to service those 6 or 7 schools that are in that sacred ground called Morehouse, Spelman, Atlanta
Atlanta.
University, Clark and Morris Brown, and the Theological Seminary.
Emory, right?
And all of that. And those 20,000 books are a collection of books by Africans or on Africa that nobody else has. And so it's nurturing those thousands of students to this day. So we have to give him his kudos.
Yes.
It was Dr. Clark who partnered with this brother, Dr. Diop, to produce a across the ocean duo of greatness.
Yes.
An explosion of information comes from both of them.
Yes.
This one coming from an indigenous African-American experience, and certainly he touched so many of us and established so many institutions and organizations. And this one, Dr. Sharonda Diop, had an impact also globally, but he comes out of a village experience in Senegal. And then he went on, and that was a Mouride, African Muslim culture in Senegal. And then he went on to the best education offered by the French to their own and to Africans in Senegal. And then after he did his high school, then he went on to France for the university education. And he got into high science and whatnot. So he has a serious $1 million white boy education. But the foundation is his African education.
Yes.
And so, but this great work is called Great African Thinkers, and that's his beautiful picture there. And it's edited by Ivan Van Sertima.
Love him.
And interesting enough to say that we are family. We really are a global village.
Yes.
Ivan Van Sertima is from Guyana in South America.
Yes.
You know, you have the 3 territories that the English, that's Guyana. The next door is Suriname, that's Dutch. And next door is Guyane, and
French
that's
Guiana.
French.
Yeah.
And so Barbara, inspired by Dr. Clark, she has Guyanese parents, and Van Sertima, but both of them, Barbara inspired by Dr. Clark, and Van Sertima, this is a book that he put together on the work of Sharonda Diop.
Yes.
And the major article in it, in reference to Sharonda Diop, is my analysis of his greatest work, which was Civilization and Barbarism.
Yes.
So Dr. Clark told me we can't wait 20 years for the translation. When this came out in '81, he said, you're going to have to take a sabbatical leave and go to Europe, hide away, and get this book translated.
Wow.
And I couldn't go in '80 One, because I was expanding our program at City College. We were going with Dr. Ben to the Nile Valley.
Nice.
In 81, we went in 82. They went in 83. I couldn't go in 83 because I was in Switzerland getting this ready.
Nice.
But then again, I went with Dr. Ben 84, 85, 86. We had a big conference in New York out of this organization that we formed called ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization.
Yes.
We formed it in Los Angeles in 84. We incorporated in Chicago in 85.
Yes.
We put an economic foundation under it when we had the conference in New York in 86. And I suggested that we go to the Nile Valley.
Nice.
And everybody was excited about going to the Nile Valley. So we took in 87, 1,000 of us, men, women, and children, grandchildren. I had 3 generations. My mother went. My nephews went. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries now, and his brother, Professor Hassan Jeffries, and Leola Jeffries, my mother, who started all this. We were all there. Gil Noble was there. I got his ticket, Dr. King. I helped 30 people go.
Nice.
So we started out small with an idea of capturing our culture and putting it in our socialization and our acculturation and in our education. And then we were faced with a global attack that this knowledge cannot be put in anybody's education. It needs to be crushed.
What?
So
who did
in
that?
the 80s and 1880s, because I was a part of a task force to put this explosion of information about Africans being the foundation of the human family, not going back 6,000 years, but going back millions of years.
Yes.
Dr. Diop has 3 parts of his great work. And the first section is called Approach to Paleontology. Paleontology is a study of early humankind and whatnot. And so he traces early humanity, the various branches of humanity, back millions of years. And as there was the evolution and the processes of change, then you get into the later periods of the hominids, and then Homo sapien, and then
so he went to the Australopithecines.
he went to the Australopithecines and all of those periods. So the first 100 pages is all of it. It was bringing the truth to this miseducation of the European world.
Right.
And so he lays out for the first 120 pages of this book the truth.
Yes.
And he puts the concept of melanin in the middle of it because there's a scientific law, Glover's law. Mammals in the sun develop melanin to resist the ultraviolet rays of the sun.
Right.
So if humankind, in whatever form, in its early form and its developmental form, if humankind has been in a sun-drenched world in order to survive, by that very nature of his existence, he had to be melanized.
That's right.
And so the humankind that was melanized, caught up in the Ice Age, went into another direction in terms of the loss of melanin.
Yes.
Because if you're in the clouds or your existence is not along the sun, within the sun along a river belly, but you're trying to survive in the caves of Europe. And so you have a part of the humankind that was in the lack of sun environment and a part that was completely in the sun environment. And so he makes the distinction of a northern cradle and a southern cradle, a cradle of the sun and a cradle of the ice.
Right.
I added the extra dimension of putting values in related to the sun factor relates to spiritual union with nature. So as you are in the sun environment and in visiting the stars and whatnot, then you conceive of a greater spirit force in the environment. And so then you began to reflect that and produce the pyramids and the great structures of the African world. And so I always make sure I don't go anywhere without my pyramids. And
Which one is it?
and here they are. Well, we might as well get into
Here's one right here.
the Great Pyramids of Giza. This could not have been conceived by people caught up into the limited environment of a cave.
Absolutely.
This would only have reason to be because you're relating the creative forces and spiritual forces of the universe to something beyond your universe. Mm-hmm. And so the pyramids were built in recognition of after your physical mm-hmm. remains have lost their life.
Yes.
Then there's an afterlife.
Yes.
And so this consciousness went way beyond any type of consciousness that you could get in the cave environment. Mm-hmm. And so the pyramids, unfortunately, in the European stealing of our history, other people have been given our pyramids. And I had to tell Mayor Koch of New York, I want my pyramids back. He said, what did you say? I said, I want my pyramids back. And so he asked me to come down to his office and have a discussion with him. My brother and I went down with 2 big boxes of books, and we beat him down with the knowledge. And we took our pyramids back. Mm-hmm. But not only did we take the pyramids back, the other great symbols.
Mm-hmm. The obelisk.
The obelisk.
Which is the Washington Monument.
That Washington Monument has nothing to do with Washington.
Not at all.
In its origin, just like the pyramids have to do with African sun people, spiritual union with nature, relating to the significance of the sun and its force in the world. This relates to the human family's relationship to life and afterlife. So this is a symbol of resurrection and rebirth.
Yes.
Has nothing to do with a slave-owning individual working with counting his ducats that he got from enslaving.
Right.
This has to do with there is a consciousness of renewal and rebirth, particularly in the valleys of the sun, where at a certain period of time, when you are studying the stars, you see that there's going to be a flood.
Yes.
And a flood takes place. When you begin to study the movement of the heavenly bodies and you can recognize when the flood season is coming, you need to move away from the riverbed because it's going to overflow.
The inundation.
And inundation takes place. And that you need to study that inundation. And then you realize after a period of time, when a certain set of stars are there, there's going to be the inundation.
Yes.
And then after a certain set of time, that inundation is going to last. And the rich inner soil of Africa, the black soil, is spread over the land.
Yes. So,
and you can have your crop.
Dr. Jeffries, I could talk to you for days. Like Dr. Jeffries and I, we talk on the phone a lot. He'll have somebody else on the other phone. Get back to me. Okay, somebody. But I have to close out. I just have to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I could look at your pictures. And Hakeem Jeffries.
And my mother with
yes,
the boys.
And your mom, yes.
In the great temple.
Yes.
In the great temple.
Yes.
In the Nile.
In Egypt.
And this is the Pillared Temple. That is the Lincoln Memorial. Is inspired by this Pillared Temple in the Nile Valley.
Okay.
The Washington Monument is inspired by this symbol of rebirth and resurrection.
Yes.
And of course, on your dollar bill, you have a pyramid
with the eye at
an
the top.
all-seeing eye,
yes.
and that's straight out of the Nile Valley.
Yes.
We need to name it and claim it.
Thank
and
you.
Use our history to continue to grow and develop.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jeffries. Thank you for tuning in to We the Village.